There we go.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. He's back again. It's the third. Is it the third time? It's the third time. I'm pretty sure.
Third time, yeah.
Third time's the charm. That's what they say.
The magic number.
I think those are just for people that didn't get it right the first or second time. They have to say third time's the charm.
Exactly, yeah.
But you're my psychedelic advisor, I would say. You're the person I go to when it talks about realms of psychedelic experiences.
Seems to be, yeah. All right, so let's see where we go today.
So I know we always talk about it being like a spiritual gateway, and I always hear it's about a spiritual gateway. I'm starting to think more on the lines of maybe it's a plant's defense mechanism, and it's just reacting to our brain, much like poison ivy experiences for some people. Some people are allergic to it where they get a rash. Maybe this is just a way that you don't consume too much of it, that a certain amount of it makes your brain do these crazy mind-bending experiences where after you take it, a lot of times people don't take it again the next day. They just take it once, and it gives this chance for this thing to still maintain its life without it being eaten 100% entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, could be. I mean, that's a theory. I've come across something similar a couple of times. The latest was Michael Pollan talking about it in terms of plants creating drugs to repel pests, basically. So it's basically insecticides ultimately, and it's quite a clever ploy whereby rather than killing the pest or parasite, which then would just basically create resistance in the rest of the population through natural selection, etc., and then they'll still get eaten loads. They just mess with their minds so that they just kind of like get confused, they wander off, they forget where the plant was, they get high basically, and that's their defense mechanism. So and there's something similar with funguses and how they, I mean, the way that they basically get into the consciousness of ants is just insane. I don't know if you've heard that whole thing where they basically they can basically start to control the nervous system of the ant so that the ant basically climbs to the highest point it can, and then basically it explodes.
Jesus.
Yeah. Oh no, it has a death grip first. So it grips onto the thing at the a branch or whatever, and then it explodes as the fungus like works its way through the body, and it disperses the spores as far and wide. So that's just an insane kind of like way that the fungus uses insects to kind of propagate itself. So there's a lot of crazy stuff that plants and fungi can do, and it's just incredible. And another thing that Michael Pollan said, which struck me, which I thought was quite amazing, how we underestimate plants, because we judge things on our own terms about in terms of consciousness and intelligence and mainly mobility. We think of it like that, but in a way, over millions, billions of years, plants have not been able to move, so they just like stay where they are. So whereas animals have evolved all sorts of different aptitudes, plants have basically focused on biochemistry. So that's where they've evolved. They've evolved their biochemistry so that they can basically attract and repel things in their environment, obviously through the air, through the soil, through all these different, the mycelium networks, etc., So it's incredibly intricate, complex pharmacon, basically, of biochemistry that is way, way beyond anything that human beings have ever managed to imitate. We try and synthesize things more or less, but it's all plants. Plants create everything, create all drugs, and a lot of the drugs, as you say, are specifically designed to alter the consciousness of other species for their own benefit, whether as defense mechanisms or as kind of like ways to propagate their seeds or spores or whatever. So it is quite unbelievable, like, how, what plants really can do. Yeah, so it may be that they have this ulterior motive, and a lot of these, kind of compounds and alkaloids with psychedelic properties, that's what their original reason for being that was. Yeah.
There's a few things Michael Pollan said that I agree with, and there's one thing I really don't agree with. I know the episode I sent you of his, he was talking about that he believes that peyote should only be specifically for Native American people, only because it's helped them out in such a way, but it's kind of like it's not for us. And I'm like, well, any plant that would be created that has these type of psychological or spiritual effects to it, they don't just limit it to one ethnicity. They leave it open for the world to discover. Now, hopefully, everyone can get a piece of whatever that is that can truly change somebody's mind or their perspective. But I get where he's coming from of being like, we've taken
Yeah.
so much as it is. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but something this beneficial. I read a story about a woman who took peyote after she had lost a baby. Had a miscarriage, and she went to Burning Man and took peyote, and she wrote in a note the baby's name of whatever the baby was going to be and put it inside of the little effigy that ended up they burned at the end of the night at Burning Man. And it brought her this form of clarity. It got her more in touch with the situation and was able to let her let go. She'll never forget, she said, but at the same time, she's able to move on with her life and not just harbor on this for the rest of her days. And I think that's an important factor we got to emphasize is that these experiences with psychedelics, whether they distort your perception of reality, who's to say that's a bad thing? A lot of our reality is distorted already. So many people want to focus on the negative. So many people want to focus on what's going on in other countries. And so many people want to focus on fighting each other. Who's to say that a drug that helps you focus in on the things around you and helps you base things maybe of things that your key factors of life that you're missing out on aren't important factors to emphasize? I didn't agree with him limiting it to one ethnicity to experience something. I think this is something that should be shared, but I don't think it should be mistreated. And this is what psychedelics end up doing. We all know a person that's like, yeah, every time I crack my back now, I get this flashback of acid. It's like, okay, well, you abused the shit out of it. Did you learn anything from it? No, I had some crazy experiences. It's like, okay, well, you're not using it in maybe the way that we should be using it is which is like a foundational tool to maybe help someone get on the right track with their life, or maybe help someone get over a lost loved one, or maybe help someone get on the path to where they feel like they need to be to make sure that life isn't just so unbearable that they end up hurting themselves. He also talked about there was a study with a plants and they were testing them on different spiders, different drugs. They tested
Oh yeah.
marijuana, they tested psychedelics, they tested caffeine, and caffeine was the worst one for them. The spider's web was all sporadic and was uncontrollable. And it makes sense that the most legal drug that we have in this world is caffeine. And it's what our system runs off of because it's like cocaine energy. Get to work, get the work done. We got to be successful. We got to build. We got to do all these amazing things. But what about the ones that really put your life in order? Caffeine doesn't help you order your life. It might straighten your house up for a day, or it might help you lose sleep, but it's not getting the basic functions of finding a harmony with life, which is what a lot of these psychedelic experiences I've heard from. Even pot. I'm not against pot. I don't smoke it anymore, but I look at them like there's beneficial effects to it. But what they choose to outlie is the minority population of the people that have a bad experience. And I think that's a harmful thing to do. Just recently on the news, there was Tesla car accidents. Back in the day when Tesla was first becoming an electric car company, was first going on the road, and this was going to be this new autopilot type thing, they were always focusing on Tesla car crashes. Then now the world's adopted electric cars and Teslas and autopilot features. Now, recently, they found a car accident that caused the life of two people that's been under investigation for a couple of months. Found out it was because of the autopilot feature on a Tesla. And then that's coming back now. When they do a psychedelic study, psychedelic for depression, for instance, they don't focus on how many people are helped by the drug. They focus on the number of people that end up killing themselves. And it's not because of the drug is why they did it. It's because if you're already in the mindset of killing yourself, a psychedelic drug isn't going to stop you. It might, but it's not going to cause you to do it. It just, you're going to end up doing it anyway because you're already thinking about doing it. And that's what they don't focus on in these studies, is that what he was talking about is this is why we have this long, and you have all these people that go against this type of drug saying, and I've come across these Twitter pages. I've reached out to them to talk about them. To a woman that runs this page about her son who died from smoking pot. Apparently, he hurt himself after smoking pot. Now, that's a possibility of happening, but you can't regulate those outliers based on the general public, where a lot of people might actually experience a benefit from it. I know plenty of past guests who have taken psychedelics and gotten their life on track and helped them get over the loss of a loved one as well, just like that story I mentioned to you in the beginning.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing they talked about on that podcast, which I think is really key, is how we kind of, we've taken a lot of these drugs basically from other cultures, for example, tobacco. And he talks a lot, quite interestingly, about the sacred use of tobacco and how that actually for him, so some people say, is actually the most powerful drug if you take it in a certain way. But it's in a ritual context. So it's done very rarely for a very special occasion with great intention, and that applies basically to everything. And the problem is that when you basically start to use them just casually, the way you're doing now, joking, as where basically CBD. Oh, fine, good. No, but it's the relationship. That's the key. Basically, as soon as it becomes a relationship between you and the drug as an individual, and your body basically craving this thing, and you just smoke 20 cigarettes a day or whatever it is because you kind of can, or you drink 5-10 cups of coffee or whatever, that's a dysfunctional and destructive relationship. The way that ayahuasca has kind of spread in the West is quite amazing and quite impressive, how by and large it's managed to maintain this really ceremonial, ritualized, sacred element where it's very, very understood that when you do take this, it's a sacrament that has to be respected, and that you only take rarely, again, maybe once a month, and that it has to be done with incredible care and respect and and intention. As soon as it becomes a commodity, as soon as it becomes commercialized, as soon as it becomes like widely available, as soon as people just start just taking it just casually for fun, then that's when you start getting the casualties. And that's when, obviously, you can't ever safeguard anything to be completely risk-free and perfectly safe anyway, because that's life. And as you say, people come to these things with all pre-existing mental conditions and different issues that they're carrying, and traumas and whatever they're carrying, their baggage. That's what it is to be human, and so it can't be perfect, but there are ways that we can really, and again, this is a theme that has been I've heard quite a lot in that podcast and others as well, creating a container that's safe. Everyone's talking about set and setting, but a context and a way that you can prepare yourself for the experience, you can integrate the experience afterwards, you can mitigate problems of overwhelm and things like that. And in a community, ideally in a community with a guide, someone experienced, then you can actually heal and grow. And that's where hopefully this kind of psychedelic renaissance can become a real benefit to us, rather than a challenge or a crisis or another problem that we have to deal with. So I think that's the main thing. It's getting out of that mindset of just consumerism, of that we just get the stuff and we just bang take it.
Well, eventually we're going to get to a point where it is going to be more commonly accepted into the world, like how it's been becoming the past 10, 15 years. But the point, like I brought up, like, how do we not have a person that is going to be what I would call a helper on your journey, or maybe a mentor and guiding you through these trips? And then my buddy goes, well, what's the difference between them and a drug dealer then? At that point, I was like, well, that's how the public's going to look at it, is like they're basically a drug dealer in a way, but there's a difference. Drug dealers just give you the drug and they go away.
Yeah.
If someone's there to help walk you through a spiritual experience to where make sure, and if anything, use it on, just have a spiritual person for your first time, just so you get the basic understanding of what it is. The issue is with a lot of trips that end up badly, and the stories that go badly with them, is because they weren't in the proper setting, they weren't in the proper headspace, and they didn't have someone to walk them through this type of thing. If you're giving someone psychedelics and you've taken it multiple times and you know what that experience is like, you're not going to let someone who's taken it their first time go in it by themselves. Like, here's a bunch of mushrooms, go trip out. No, it doesn't happen. You're going to walk them through it, because you're going to know how a weird experience that's going to be for them, and any slight thing that could go wrong could end up ruining that experience for them for the rest of their life.
Exactly. That's it. Yeah. So, it's just to do it in a sensible, mature way, and that's kind of what is everyone's trying to do. I mean, I watched another. It was a kind of mini conference called on the psychedelic renaissance and the future of Christianity. So this was quite interesting because this was the first. I'd never really seen this before. It was like 3 pastors or ministers being interviewed by. She was Catholic, the person interviewing. There was a Episcopalian American priest there. There was a Presbyterian, again American guy, and then there was a Dutch minister from the Unitarian Church. So they were all like Christian religious leaders, and they were talking about these retreats where I think the Episcopalian one did it through the John Hopkins program. So it was like legally done for in a medical setting. Anyway, they'd all had life-changing experiences. They all had their different stories, but they're talking about this idea of a container, and for them obviously the container being Christianity, but coming to it like through the lens of psychedelics, basically seeing the teachings and the Christian mythos, what are you going to call it, through that lens, suddenly becoming a really powerful way for spiritual practice and spiritual progress. So I mean, that was a really fascinating talk. Also, another point they made, which I thought was absolutely key, is that obviously there's the medical side of things, the therapeutic side, the scientific side. That's all kind of like going ahead, and that's kind of like going quite quickly in terms of all these clinical trials, etc., etc. The religious side of things, which is also where a lot of people's interest is in. Obviously, there's the kind of therapeutic side, the healing, but then there's also this thing about personal growth, spirituality, all this. Christianity is like by far still the biggest religion in the world. It's just huge, obviously the Catholic Church has a major. So their thing was that they need to educate Christian leaders. They need to change the stigma, get rid of the stigma, because huge stigma in the Christian community against psychedelics and mind-altering drugs, and all the associations with, it's the war on drugs,
not the children either.
You can imagine.
Children.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe the children are more open to it, but even that, it's even with older people, it's shifting. I mean, these were kind of like in their, middle-aged people. And just imagine if the church, if the Vatican, or at the top level, basically they shifted their attitude and they gave the green light, and they said, blessings to, it's not for everyone, but psychedelics are they're in our history, because this is again coming out as well through the Brian Muraresku thing. I think we might have talked about that last time, the Immortality Key, where he looks at the kind of psychedelic roots of Christianity and in the early Christians, etc. So there's more and more evidence coming that actually it is integral to the actual, early history and the development of Christianity anyway. And with all this like scientifically backed clinical research into the benefits and all the mystical experiences that people are reporting, that are becoming impossible to ignore now. And whatever language that's couched in, whether it's Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever, they seem to be significant and real and life-changing. So it's going to be something that the church as a whole will not be able to ignore for very much longer. And that flip, when it becomes when it becomes more friendly towards it, that's going to be huge, because that's going to be when, even you can imagine like your local church, your parish priest or whatever, you can have groups, you can have integration groups, you can talk to them about your experience, you can prepare, it can all be done in that setting. They can, refer you to, to start with, it will be, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, but 10, 20 years time, it will become an integral part of the West, of our religion.
It's so hard to look at that, because I've talked to plenty of people that study mythology and plenty of people that study history, and it seems like we've kind of all agreed on the fact that there's just one thing missing that's been carried on through the civilizations that's not here anymore, and that is psychedelics. I mean, looking at old religious tales and looking at how they were able to find certain stains psychedelic inside cups and chalices and all this types of sort throughout history.
In Spain, that's right.
it gets to a point though where there's two people when it comes to politics or the government that kind of run everything about how the system or what gets legalized and all this. And there's two kind of sides in it. There's the side that wants people to be on drugs because they look at it like then they'll be doped up and not care what's going around. And then there's the other side that doesn't want that because they want our people strong and not a doped up society. It always falls down to a doped up society. There's no in between. There's a comedian, Jessie Mae Peluso. She microdoses mushrooms 5 days a week in her coffee in the morning, just microdoses mushrooms. Not you don't
Mm.
need to take it so much to where you trip out, but enough to where you're able to think maybe clearer or maybe have some type of anxiety relief that comes from it. That's how it starts. And then if you have your own free time, you don't need to work or you don't need to be a productive member of society, then you go trip out at home. I don't care. But it does come to a factor of there's a main idea that we need to be productive as people, not only in our own lives, but as a culture and as a society,
Mm.
we need to be producing because we are a
Yeah,
top name country or we are a country that is in competition with other countries. And that makes it very,
yeah,
very hard to
absolutely.
legalize a drug.
Well, I mean, again, there's some truth in that, but there is also this assumption, this hangover that we have, which is a kind of a prejudice that, you know, people, drug fiends, you know, they're just kind of like these losers that are just lying around doing nothing. And, you know, obviously there is that possibility. Well, that does happen, you know, the bed of Procrustes, as they call it in the Greek myths, which is, you know, really associated with opiates, really. Like, you know, the whole opium crisis in China was exactly that, you know, the you know, the opium wars with Britain
Yeah.
basically got the Chinese stone so that we could, like, you know, kind of dominate the whole region. So of course drugs can be used in that way to placate, you know, to pacify, placate, to get population out of your way, basically. That's not okay. So that's one thing, but that's not a general effect of all drugs and the way they're taken. And you're right that it is also to do with dosage and intention. So if you do take microdose or threshold, you know, small amounts, it actually has been shown to increase productivity, increase creativity, increase a lot of things that can actually benefit society and make you work better. The heroic doses is another kettle of fish, which is about changing your whole outlook on life, really, and being and transforming something on a deeper level. But again, even that, if done sensibly, and again with psychedelics, it's not something that you can do every day anyway. This is just like a big like experience that you need to prepare for. That also makes you more, not less, usually engaged in the world and engaged with society and engaged with your life. So but again, it has to do with the intention and the container with which you're doing it. If your intention is to escape, escapism is because your life is shit and you just want to get high and forget about it. If that's what you're doing it for, then whatever the drug of choice is to do that, that's where you're going to go. You're going to become more and more, you know, useless and lost. If your intention is to improve your life, is to be a better whatever employee, father, you know, friend, person, ultimately, then then it's an aid and it could help you to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a magic bullet. It's not. It's an aid. It's like with everything. It's how do you use this? You know, it's
I just tried
I
to
like.
Google on my phone what like psychedelic research, new psychedelic research. Everything is from like 4 or 5 months ago. Nothing's top trending articles right now. And I don't know. I think it's just a factor of society doesn't care a whole lot about it because not a lot of people have had this experience to be able to do so. People know about smoking pot, but even then, if you go to, do you smoke pot? Do you smoke pot? People like keep it hush hush, keep it like that's not incentivizing it to get a big push to become major legal. You're keeping it on secret or you're keeping, I don't want anybody to know about it. It's because it's been stigmatized so bad. The history on drugs in general is not a good one. It's been thrown dirt on top of so many freaking times. And I'm like, we're never going to see a giant push or a giant change if we don't start talking about it more. If you don't, people don't share their experiences. If people don't are not more open about it, it's still kind of like, yeah, I smoke pot, whatever. And then it's glossed over. It's like, well, talk about it for a minute so we can understand that we're all not doing something illegal still. It's kind of more legal
Yeah.
than anything, and it's not even, it's decriminalized in my opinion.
Yeah. But I mean, it's slowly changing. It's slowly changing. It's quite, heartening to hear these. Well, both Michael Pollan and these Christian priests were saying the same thing. That for him, when he first wrote, How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan, he was expecting to have huge pushback and criticism and like have to really fight his corner, and everyone would think he was nuts. But it was the opposite. People were really interested, engaged, and kind of and the same with this priest who was very worried about coming out, so to speak, about about his experience with psychedelics and his interest in it and his promotion of it. And again, he was pleasantly surprised that people were actually very positive and were open and were curious and were asking. And so I think it's just that thing of a bit of a snowball, that a few brave people start to speak out and to be open and to and then I think you'll find that it would just become gradually more accepted and more part of the general conversation, and would just become a normal, and I do feel that the stigma is fading, is going away. It's like it's the war of drugs is over. Drugs won, and that's the reality.
Well, the only scar that I really see that's left here is going to end up lingering for a while, and I think it's what's stopping it from becoming so legal is the psychological effects that it has to it. Not the drug itself, but just the stigma behind it. When it comes to psychological things, a lot of people like myself are kind of scared on the aspect of what it's going to open up, or it's the
Yeah,
fact of how it's been stigmatized and ingrained into our heads for so long that if you do this, it's going to end up like marijuana, for instance. The history behind that was that it was this drug coming from Mexico that caused you to kill and rape other people. It's the dumbest
yeah,
fucking thing if anybody really looked into it, but some guy
yeah.
slipped it in, and now the whole world has been like DARE program, all these types of things that ended up incentivizing people to do drugs actually more. They touch on these topics, but they implement the first impression into your head is that when you smoke pot, you're going to be lazy and you're going to be like so unproductive. Then
Mm,
psychedelics, you'll have these scary mind bending trips, like every show that experiences it. It's all fucking
mm,
crazy shit. What about the
mm,
normal stuff? Like get people's experiences of what helped them come to clarity or what all these types of things are. This is the
mm.
psychological scars. People are afraid to
That's
take
right.
it. And if you ask
Exactly.
them, why are they afraid to take it? They'll give you a variety of answers, but they're all stuff that you have commonly heard or been shown on TV or movies.
Exactly. That's right. Exactly. Yes, but that's exactly what's changing. That people don't buy that narrative anymore. Having said that, that does remind me of I had a little insight recently. I wrote a blog, I think, which was about the Garden of Eden and the cherubim. There's two cherubim at the entrance to the Garden of Eden who are basically barring the way. I don't know if you remember that story, but anyway, Adam and Eve, we get exiled and they can't return. And then I was wondering, who are the two cherubim who bar the way back to the Garden of Eden, which obviously represents this, our like kind of harmonious state of connection with nature, etc. And the conclusion I came to was it's fear and cynicism. Those are the two things that basically stop us changing, that stop us facing ourselves, that stop us taking the risk to actually transform. Fear of basically going mad, so in whatever way that kind of manifests for us, whether it's self-harm or just like completely losing it, going psychotic episode, etc., etc. I mean, and this is the narrative that was pushed in the war on drugs. Obviously, it's like massive misinformation, but so often with a grain of truth that people do sometimes have schizophrenic or psychotic breaks, etc. But you build up the fear. The other one, cynicism, is the way that you just basically dismiss or laugh it off or just denigrate it, or just it's just a load of rubbish, it's just a bunch of hippies, it doesn't mean anything, it's not real. So those two together are the great barriers to people's ability to actually take them seriously enough for them to actually help them, and they are an enormous potential to help people. And that's the tragedy, and that's the challenge, to overcome those those angels of resistance ultimately. Yeah,
That's
what
weird
was I
that
going to
you
say?
thought that because when you said Adam and Eve, I'll go, did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? Because if they didn't have an umbilical cord, right? So how could they have belly buttons? Why is every
Maybe not.
depiction of them belly buttons?
It just looks better, doesn't
Thanks.
it?
It's more appealing. It's like having
It
5
is,
toes instead of 4.
exactly. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say something and I forgot what it was. Cynicism.
Did I throw you off with the belly buttons?
No, it was no. Wait. Anyway, yeah. Basically,
I threw you off with the
yeah.
belly
Oh,
buttons.
yeah. No. I remember now. Yeah. No. It just. Yeah. So another thing that people have been talking about, as well as this idea of a container, is saying what went wrong in the '60s. We kind of threw it out. Everyone just went nuts. Not everyone. Some people. What we lacked was, I think Joe Rogan said this in the podcast, we didn't have an operating manual.
Yeah.
So what we need is an operating manual, which is basically a set of clear instructions or an understanding of what is the best, safest way to take these productively and constructively so that we can actually use them. Because again, anything that any powerful tool can be used or abused. The same nuclear power, obviously, is the most obvious example. You can like blow up a city, or you can create like energy to run a city. So the point is, what is the operating manual? I realized that my book that I wrote, The Confessions of a Psychedelic Christian, I talked about it the first time probably, I kind of tried to sell it in that way, like a confessional thing, but that actually isn't my attempt to offer an operating manual, although it's kind of couched in my own experiences, etc., etc. So I thought, okay, I need to write a sequel, which is much more just the practical thing of how do you do this? Maybe turning down the Christian thing, because that's off-putting for some people. And I thought, what should I call it? Good title, maybe. How to Take Psychedelics Seriously. And this is the point. It's people don't take them seriously, so that's the cynicism, but also how to take them seriously in a way that is meaningful, transformative,
You should
in
call
a
it
kind of ritual spiritual.
TripAdvisor is a way better name.
TripAdvisor. That's been done. I think that was taken. Anyway, I might not do it. I might not use that name, but that I think is that's the thing that in terms of educating people needs to happen. It's for people to take it seriously, that these are significant and powerful tools, including the church. So they need to take it seriously and stop just pretending it's just some like game that hippies like playing. To take it seriously, and also how to take it constructively and safely, and to overcome the fear, because often the cynicism is actually a front for the fear. It's like people are actually really scared, but so then they put this front of like of taking the piss as a defense mechanism.
I'm afraid of taking them.
Yeah, I mean that's fair enough. Is anything that is the unknown and something that has so much hype. I mean, that's the other thing. That's the other kind of like paradox, that the more people who are really into them try to hype them up and say, yeah, they're amazing, they do this, that, and the other. It's like, whoa, that just sounds insane and crazy. I'm not going near that. So it's just a difficult sell, because the more you want to make it like sound amazing, the more frightening it is. But then you say, oh no, it doesn't really do much. It's just a little bit, and it's oh, what's the point then? So it's a difficult balance, and until you, yeah, I mean, my advice for people who are interested and maybe intrigued and want to explore themselves, and also are interested in themselves and in their minds and how they tick, because that's also what a lot of the fear is they don't want to, you don't want to know, you don't want to face yourself, you don't want to kind of look inside yourself and find whatever demons are lurking there. It's not just the fear of the drug, it's fear of yourself. What will this reveal? What will, will I come back from this kind of like confrontation with myself? Maybe I am a monster or a weirdo or mad or fragile, or maybe I'm not as strong as all of these anxieties. Of course they're normal, until you know yourself, the Delphic Oracle, know thyself, that's the goal. Until you actually know yourself enough, then there's always that fear of who am I, and what can I, is that gonna kill me, like looking at the Gorgon's head, turn me to stone? You don't know. We're in the realm of magic ultimately,
Well, all you know is what you know right now. All you know is the experience. For a lot of people who have never taken psychedelics, is what they know right now. Like before I smoked pot, And then after smoking pot, I know exactly how I can never think the same ever again. And that's a scary thing for a lot of people. What psychedelics going to change about their everyday life that they're so used to? You're used to the
Yeah,
same skin every single day. Now imagine if you got a tattoo on it. Now you have something different on your skin that you have to adjust to. You're going to adjust to it, but that fear of what is that adjustment going to be like? How big of a change is it going to be is a scary thing. Now, in another
yeah,
dimension, maybe if psychedelics weren't ever illegal, or marijuana wasn't ever illegal, it never had this bad stigma to it, and we're at the place that we're at now, there's probably be so many roadmaps and so many instruction manuals on how to do it
yeah,
effectively.
exactly. Yeah,
So what you're saying is something that's probably, it might seem like a new thing. We should have had it already. That's the thing, is
yeah,
why is it still taking so long, is because so many people go, well, there has to be something like that. There's not, because it was never legal for people to want to sell a book on how to do it. Then you're basically waiting for cops to show up at your door to be arrested for writing a book on how to do psychedelics, because it wasn't legal at the time. Now it's legal and people are interested into it. I think for you, for instance, you should start a show or a podcast, not like as long as I do, or doesn't even need to be 30 minutes, but maybe short little clips on your Twitter, or short little clips on any media platform or your blog, where you just talk about it, like 5-10 minutes, and you just have a conversation and talk about these types of things, talk about experiences, talk about trips, talk about certain key plot holes or navigational ways, so people can find it. Like, I know plenty of people that if you just mentioned a couple things from your book, like certain excerpts or certain chapters, you do that in a 5-10 minute video, people are going to be interested in wanting to buy the book. And then you could go, well, I don't want to put it all out there. Don't put it all out there. Leave some that's in the book, a little extra for them, but give them
mm,
some basic things that you find that are going to supply people out there who have the curiosity, like myself, that don't have the navigational tools to be able to find you, contact you, and set up a private one-on-one consultation for it. That's basically what this is. You're explaining to me your pathways of how you got into the way that you think now, based on the whatever the roadmap or the whatever the thing of psychedelics. And for someone who hasn't taken it like myself, it's a very big insight, because it lets me know that there's not this whole entire giant stigma behind it, where I think of it as this crazy thing that's going to cause you to explode your head, or some type of random shit that goes along with it. It's something a little bit different. It's a form of clarity that helps people understand and rationalize their life goals, and also find a way to be able to manage this thing that we call life.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a good idea. It's something I should
Write it
probably
down.
do. Yeah, I'll
Write it
write it
down.
down. I mean, I can tell you a little bit, just very briefly, about the the roadmap that I've kind of set out, which is kind of simple, really, but then it can get more, which is based on these archetypes that I think I might have talked about before. But it's very simple. Ultimately, the idea is, I did mention it before, that it starts with the mystic and shaman archetype. Yeah, these
Mhm.
things go together. Yeah, and what that means. So that's the first line, the mystic shaman, and then I've got the warrior monk and the philosopher king. Okay, so that is the map in a nutshell. So what it means in practice is that to go into the psychedelic experience, you begin by getting into a mystical state. And what that means is through meditation, there's different ways of doing that. You basically quiet down your mind, yeah, so that you basically you sort of stop thinking in the grooves that you normally think in. You inhibit the default mode network in your brain. Basically, you quiet everything down. If you can manage it so that you stop thinking, but not everyone can get to that point. And that mystical state is about basically stopping the patterns, the habitual patterns that we have, including addictions or whatever the thought patterns, everything. So that's the mystic. The shaman, you do the same in the body. So all of the patterns of tension in your body, in the muscles and in the nervous system, and all of that kind of stuff, which we just hold subconsciously all the time, you let go of all that. So basically relax. So by relaxing your body and mind, it's Zen, the Zen master Dogen, a point of enlightenment, he said, body mind dropped. That was his expression, body mind dropped. So that's the point. You start by dropping body and mind. So that means you just let go of everything. You surrender. All of these words point to that thing. That's kind of easy to understand, I think. People who do meditation understand that. If you start with that, so that you basically have kind of like cleared the slate, yeah, fresh snow, everything's like clean. That's when the reconstruction can happen. And that's what the other archetypes point to. So the warrior points to the body. And what happens there is that basically you start to develop new patterns. And those patterns are patterns of movement, even your posture. So even the way you hold yourself, yeah, suddenly your body is free to create new, healthier patterns. And that you do that, again, it looks kind of shamanic because it's through dance and through martial arts, and you start to move. You know, in the West, we've forgotten how to move our bodies. We're just so sedentary. We're just sitting here for an hour, literally, just like, and
Try
you
doing
look
10
around
in a row.
yeah, I bet. Do you know what I mean? It's like we've lost touch with our bodies, okay? And that's a basic primary thing that shamanism and the psychedelics can do, is connect you to your body, wake up the energy of your body, wake up the intelligence of your body, so that you can learn again to move again without the mind kind of judging and kind of controlling you like a puppet, because that's ultimately how we do it. We drag our body around, as if it's just the appendage to our egos. So it's about bringing the body to life and reprogramming the physical patterns of movement, etc., and behavior. So that's the karma yoga, which is about the warrior, it's about action. And then the bhakti yoga, which is related to the monk, is about patterns of feeling. So this is again where the Christianity starts to come in, because ultimately through music is pattern in sound. Music is the epitome of patterns, and those patterns are kind of like almost directly mirrored in our inner emotional life. This is how we experience all the feelings and emotions are basically energetic patterns. Yeah, so it's again rediscovering and rewriting those patterns so that you get over the negative emotions and you start to cultivate this absolute like world of emotions that again we're cut off from, because we've become so stereotyped in our culture about the certain types of ways that you should feel, which generally are to do with feeling stressed, but also kind of euphoric, kind of primitive basic feelings, which can become far more refined through music and art and this kind of stuff. Then through psychedelics, you're sensitized to then kind of finding new patterns of feeling. And then the philosopher king bit at the end is about patterns of thought, so that your usual grooves of the way that you habitually think about things, again that kind of gets deconstructed, and then you can start to find new ways of seeing things, new perspectives, new patterns, and ultimately developing your thinking skills. So this is again answering your original question about what's the practical benefit. Do drugs just make people, vegetables just sitting around like useless and doing nothing? No. If you use it in a constructive way, you can actually cultivate yourself, train ultimately in your body, feelings, and mental ability to become, better
But
in all ways. So that's
it's a very vocal few that speak the way that you speak, want to educate people on the use and benefits of this type of thing. When it comes to, like, if I'm standing from a politician standpoint and I hear that, I just gonna fucking throw you right out the door. There's no sense in that. There's first thing it comes to is money. But if you get enough people that rise hell or talk about this type of thing, or you make it more of the norm, the issue right now is that doing psychedelics or doing marijuana or any of those type of things to the world is probably a minority. But is it though? How many people are just doing it and not talking about it? How many people are doing it and not feeling free about it, not being openly expressed about it? We know there's more people doing marijuana or smoking weed now. But what about psychedelics? How many of those people are smoking psychedelics now? How many people are microdosing?
A lot of people. I mean, the famous one is Steve Jobs, but a lot of people in Silicon Valley, a lot of
Dead.
people he is dead, but he
We need
developed.
people that are alive doing this right now.
No. I'm saying that a lot of the creativity that developed the original technology around the internet and computing, a lot of them were taking acid, and this was
the guy who developed
shown.
the COVID-19
That's right.
response test was on LSD
Yeah,
when he discovered making that.
The
Yeah.
CPR, for example. Yeah, exactly. So, this is something that a lot of people are exploring and using to enhance creativity and enhance mental acuity, and either microdosing or having stronger trips. They've been doing that for decades, and quietly, obviously, but they have been the Steve Jobses who have ended up being successful on the back of it. So, you know, it's already there. You know, that's again one application of it that kind of is consonant with my approach, because it is about training yourself to, you know, to be, you know, it's like that film. It wasn't a great film, but what was that film? Well, anyway, it was a drug that made him super
Limitless.
intelligent. That's the one, Limitless. Yeah, which
Bradley
is,
Cooper.
you know, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, yeah. It's a fun film, but you know, it's that's kind of pointing to that that effect of drugs like psychedelics, even caffeine. I mean, in the Michael Pollan talk, he was you know, showing how caffeine actually does make you more productive, but can focus better. You know, all these things are mind-altering substances that don't alter the mind always in the same way, and don't alter it in the direction of confusion and lethargy, but can often be incredibly, you know, focused and hyper productive. You know, I mean, even mushrooms on a small dose have been shown for your visual acuity to become much sharper, for example. There's lots of evidence on that. So I mean, that's the other thing, you know. These are psychotechnologies. These are tools. You know, one of the things that defines us as human beings is that we're constantly enhancing ourselves through the tools that we develop. You know, and from fire to spears to, you know, ultimately to computers, to the mobile phone, where we've got the whole of, you know, knowledge at our fingertips. You know, psychedelics are another technology that can enhance us and you know, in different ways. My interest is to be able to do that in a way that's holistic, so that it's not just about, you know, kind of like creating the next big whatever, but it's about developing yourself in terms of your body, feelings, mind, and your spirit, and in an integrated way. So it's that's the way I think it should go. But you know, people are doing it in all sorts of ways, you know, to help them, whether it's problem solving or in relationships, to problems with, you know, with empathy. That's another thing. The empathogens, MDMA, etc. You know, there's all these applications that are really useful and important, and can make people's lives and even communities better. So it's like a no-brainer.
It just needs a better outlet or a better source to be able to get the information easier. There's a lot of information on it, but a lot of it is sold in book form, and a lot of, sadly, the first link always takes you to Amazon. It's like a lot of people just want to know some basic tips. You know, writing a blog like yourself, for instance, it's not going to be the first result on there, because, and then people lose interest because everyone always looks at the first result. It's just because it's not talked about more. There's still a stigma impact to it. And I wonder if that's going to change in the next 5-10 years. I mean, we're seeing a drastic change with marijuana. I'm curious to see if psychedelics will end up I think microdosing is probably the best bet for a lot of people. I probably would do perfect on some microdosing on those types of things. I wouldn't probably take it to go into work or something like that. But at the same time, I think it can really elevate your perspective, which I think is an importance. So I usually have 10, 15 episodes in the tank when I do a podcast. I don't have any of those anymore. I'm one episode in the tank now, because I've just been taking days off and trying to relax and really just find out who I am as a person, you know, especially looking at like life is really, really amazing. And you really don't notice it a whole lot because you're always focused on the place that you got to go and the destination on how to get there. And I look at like just taking a nice inhale and just smelling salt air because I live at the beach. It's something that is not accessible to every single person out there. Looking up at the stars at night, not accessible for a lot of people that live in cities that are covered by, you know, air pollution or something like that. And it's really, if you offered psychedelics saying this could help you maybe make a device or expand your mind out or become this next Steve Jobs, or if would you be happy if I just made it into a person that you are comfortable with being, a person that you are happy with in the life that you have, and really can elevate your perspective to realize that you have so much. Every day someone says, I say good morning to someone, they say, good morning, how's it going? I said, I'm living the dream. And they go, living the dream. They start laughing. I'm like, yeah, but I have air in my lungs. And is that anything more than what I really want? A heartbeat?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, that reminds me that actually, are you aware of John Vervaeke's work, the cognitive scientist? from Toronto? No? Okay, really, really worth checking out. It's got an amazing series on YouTube called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Really good. Anyway, one of the people he uses for his thing is Eric Fromm, who wrote a book called To Have or To Be, and he talks about it in terms of different existential modes. So basically the having mode is the kind of Steve Jobs mode, which is about you use tools and things in order to get a goal, as you're describing it, to what's your aim, you're trying to move, to become successful, etc., etc. That's the having mode, and it's also wrapped up with obviously having stuff, so it's not just success but possessions, etc. The being mode is more about who am I now, and existence in itself. So in a way you can get people onto the, let's say, psychedelics, microdose, whatever, to try to improve their having mode, to kind of achieve a goal, solve a problem. But the interesting thing is that it often will wake up or shift back to the being mode, so that suddenly they'll be like, they'll start to be more interested in just being, and as you say, of being the air in your lungs, etc., and the absolute wonder of that, and the magic and the mystery of just existence. Doesn't matter what you have and what you do or what you succeed in. And that, again, I think is actually huge, even though it sounds a bit hippy dippy and a bit obvious and banal and like, yeah kind of thing. And again, you can be cynical about that and dismiss it. It actually can be completely life-changing, because it makes your life worth living now, and you're not constantly kind of on the wheel, always kind of like deferring your ability to enjoy your life, or to kind of accept your life, to the future. And also how it would change the way people are to each other, in society, that we wouldn't be constantly chasing each other's tails and constantly striving and trying, we'd be able to relax a bit more, and kind of like just be together and just chill.
Many people want to elevate their life, but only on the elevating part that is their standards of wealth, or whatever their wealth class is. But if you ask a person to elevate their emotions and elevate their empathy towards others, it's not an attractor, sadly. People just want a better car to drive, a better house to live in, and never have to worry about money. But I think it's just our perceptional value of what wealth is. Wealth is also just not hating your life.
That's it, exactly. I mean, Epictetus, the Stoic, famously said that the wealthiest person is he who doesn't need anything. It's again, it's to do with the need. Once you don't need to have all this stuff, and you're just happy to be, then you've got everything you want. Whereas a millionaire is constantly like chasing the next yacht, whatever, it will never be satisfied. So I mean, it's a kind of, it's a cliche, but like a lot of these things, I think Michael Pollan said that mentioned that at the end of the podcast, about how a lot of these insights on psychedelics sound so banal, like I love everyone, and like yeah. But the point is that what the psychedelics offer is that you experience it, you live it, you embody it, and that these banal things like loving everyone or accepting your life or etc. Are only banal because they've lost the juice. They're cliches because they've lost the force behind the truism that they are. They're true. Love is everything. It's true. But if I just say it like that and you're not feeling it, then it's just like banal.
Get away from it. Get away from
it. Exactly. It's like, oh, but when you're feeling it, and when you're like full of it, it's just like boom, and that's the thing that then changes everything. And that's the thing that then you're full of love, you're full of joy, you're full of, all these words, again, religious words, grace, again, they were talking about that in the Christian thing, how, church service on a Sunday is such a turn off to people because it's boring. You just sit there in the hard pew, listen to the sermon, like all these words that just like blah, 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 all this rhetoric that doesn't really mean anything. You take psychedelics, you hear the same words, and suddenly it's like, whoa, it's just full of power and energy, because suddenly they're real. It's real. All these things, it's only real when you feel it. you know. And so a lot of it again is about waking up and turning on the you know, in a way, our energetic system. Again, you know, the more you talk about it, you know, it's all fine talking about it, but is that really what we need? Because we could talk about it to the cows, you know, and people are just gonna, we'll end up sounding like hippies.
Yeah.
If I start talking about energy now, it's like, oh, right, here we go. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
He's
but then
bringing up the Reiki energy healing again.
Yeah, exactly. How else can you talk about it? You know, use Christian language. You know, the Holy Spirit, whatever. You use the Reiki language.
The best way you can talk about it is about elevating the perspective that you're in. Just try it. Elevate the perspective that you're in. The way it's kind of like a lot of people talk about, like, if someone says something to you and you're trying to explain, oh no, I'm not like that at all. And then it's like, well, you've already lost because you've accepted that. Now you're trying to rationalize an excuse to why you're not like that thing that they called you or whatever. You just got to be like, explain. You got to say something simple and cut it off to where you know that you know how you feel, you know how strong in your convictions you are. If someone says, but isn't psychedelic, don't they make you a hippie? Well, it's more about that. It's about love. You're already going deep into it already and you're losing half the audience. Just say, try it for yourself. Elevate your perspective.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That you have to, if you don't experience it, there's nothing you can do except just kind of pique people's interest and curiosity. And ultimately, that's kind of what art is. That's kind of what poetry is. That's kind of what music is. That's what cathedrals are, you know. But the incredible beauty and the awesomeness of the whole of the, you know, 2 millennia of Christian tradition that actually should be blowing us away, we're just bored of it, and it just doesn't touch us. I mean, that's the perpetual challenge, is to find modes and forms and mediums that can actually somehow get through and touch someone enough that turns them on enough that they want to turn themselves on more. And then you start the process, and then it becomes a virtuous cycle where it's like, okay, this is, oh, I can feel something there. How do I get more of this? And it doesn't have to be through psychedelics, obviously. It can be, there's all sorts of other ways of doing it. But just to start that process going, that's the challenge, to show something better, more attractive, more juicy, you know, better energy. You know, I was at the Medicine Festival recently, which is a new festival in England, which is based on medicine, you know, as in the psychedelics, but hence the name, yeah, plant medicines, but you know, being more generally about the medicine that can heal us and make us better. You know, so it's you know, concerts, music, but all sorts of yoga, all that kind of stuff. It's not quite a new agey festival, but it's along those lines with a shamanic kind of vibe. Beautiful place in the countryside. It's absolutely gorgeous. I took my son there and he loved it. And it was just like, that's people going to that festival, for example, who maybe had no connection with any of this stuff. They're getting the medicine, they're getting glimpses of it, and they're like, this is cool. This makes me feel good. This is beautiful. This is amazing. This is like, I'd rather do this than kind of sit in my bedsit, kind of like on the computer or listening to the latest Kanye album. Nothing against Kanye, but do you know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck, you know, this is cool. This is brilliant. And that's the thing, you have to, that's the sell. The sell is just to show another way. That's a better way, until people, you know, try to discover it for themselves. The talking at the end of the day doesn't really do it. You can't convince people, you can't rationalize it, you can't, you know, the words ultimately fail, you know. I mean, some people love words, and then if you use, you know, it works sometimes, but I think mainly it's the experience. People want experience, and so you have to give them little bits of experience so that they seek more experience. And through the experience, that's how we grow. That's how we learn. You know, we are experiencing beings. We're not just like brains in vats. Do you know what I mean? And that again, going back to the shamanic way, it's body, energy, feelings. You know, it has to be lived, and it can't just be an abstract thing. Can't just. I mean, even the thing about perspective, it's not just about that you have a different perspective, and you know, it's not just the mind. And this is where we're stuck ultimately in our cultures, that we're so like cut off at the neck. We're just so living in this virtual kind of like mindscape that we just need to get back to the body, get back to nature. You know, again, I'm sounding like a hippie, you know, that's the thing. I can't get away from it. But I'm just, you know, pointing there to so so that people can try to move at least their intention to go that way. Otherwise, I don't know, we're lost if we just keep going the way we're going, ending up in
you're not wrong, man. It's interesting because I think it's a lot about, like, you've seen it, you understand what that experience is like, and for someone who hasn't, like myself, I hear you say it and I understand that's how you feel. It's just so hard to rationalize that connect, but it is something you just got to experience for yourself. And it's as simple as that.
yeah,
You can put it, you can sit and explain it all day, and you want to explain it because you know how helpful it is, but at the
yeah,
same time, people are just got to come to that conclusion on their own. And hopefully with the more that
exactly,
it's becoming legal, it's going to push a lot more people to want to consume it. And eventually, a generation or so down the line, you're going to have people that are going to always be experiencing this and not know what it was like before. There's going to be a time probably in our lifetimes where we'll be able to say, or there's going to be kids that are going to be like saying, what do you mean psychedelics were illegal? Yeah, they were illegal for a very long time. And it's like, I don't, because
yeah,
there's kids that don't know what it's like to grow up without the cell phone.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Well,
So
yeah, it could be that way. That's the hope. Yeah, that it becomes just a normal part of our world, and of our culture, and that we can be grown up and mature enough to do it in a way that furthers us and society and the world, and deals with all these crises that we're facing. The climate, blah 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 blah.
there's a long list.
It's a
But
long list. I'm not going to bother.
why don't you tell
Yeah.
people, Sebastian, where they can find you and be able to look at your links and also check out your blog as well too, and hopefully look into your book as well.
Yeah, so it's all on the website, basically. It's www.pachananda.com. That's the website. And then all my blogs are on there, and other information, and a link to Amazon where you can buy the book as well, Confessions of a Psychedelic Christian. I'm on Twitter at Seb Gaete. That's all really. And other than that, I'm at home.
And I'll make sure
doing my thing.
I'll link
Yeah.
everything in the description for the audience that's listening. They'll be able to check the description details of this episode and be able to find it. And I appreciate you, Sebastian, for joining me on the podcast again. Is there anything you want to leave the
That's okay.
audience on out there before we wrap it up?
No, I'm just quite excited about this whole development, and yeah, just really curious to see how it goes. And I hope more people do get interested and want to get involved, and we can kind of like build something together. So yeah, that's what I'd leave it, as an invitation for people to get involved.